Connect with Mexico is happy to welcome you to one more episode, a Friday episode of This Week in Mexico, where we will tell you some of the headlines and what has been happening in this country during the last 7 days. You must be an expat who speaks English, who very likely is living or residing in the country. So I just want you to know that you have come to the right place. This week, we celebrated on November 20th the 124th anniversary of the Mexican Revolution, of the start of the Mexican Revolution. That big conflict that started in 1910, it kind of concluded, but not really. It resulted in the Mexican Constitution of 1917, which is still rules. Some critics, some columnists this very week have said that the Mexican Revolution regime is pretty much coming to an end and that the Constitution itself is being dismantled as we speak. But anyway, before we get a bit into politics, I think it makes sense to share with you a little bit of the Mexican Revolution parade that was held in Mexico City with President Claudia Sheinbaum presiding. I guess that's what presidents do. She was there, and I think you will find it very interesting. Before we actually get to the headlines and to the program as such, why don't we enjoy a little bit of what happened this 20 November on the Mexican Revolution Parade in Mexico City?
¡Que viva la Revolución Mexicana! ¡Y que viva nuestro querido México!
Welcome back to the show. What will we be talking about in today's show? Four things. One is a big headline Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, attending the G20 Summit in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, and also the discussion and very likely approval of the 2025 Mexican government federal budget. Do not think for a second that because you are an expat here in Mexico, you are immune to Mexican government policy. That is not the right way to think. And then we also are going to take you to the Hot Air Balloon Festival in León, Guanajuato, that happened last weekend. And we will also take some time to introduce you to a Mexican woman who is 32 years old, very wealthy, very influential, and very close to President Sheinbaum. We think you will enjoy very much meeting her. Okay, so let's go for our first headline. This is having President Sheinbaum visit the G20, attending the G20 summit in Rio, along with other heads of state of the major industrial nations or major economies of the world. This was news on itself because we have not had a president of Mexico attend any summit pretty much in the last 6 years. So her predecessor, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, he went to the White House once, and I believe he went to California for an APEC summit or something like that. Those were the only two trips he took. He did not like going abroad. He always sent his foreign minister, Marcelo Ebrard, who now happens to be the economy minister under President Sheinbaum. And President Lopez Obrador always claimed that the best foreign policy was domestic policy. So he refused to get on a plane only when he really had to. The other heads of a state who are used to talking to their counterparts from other countries were really surprised to see a president of Mexico at the G20, right? It was like, oh, it's so good to have the leader of the country come as opposed just to the foreign minister. So that was good news. It seems like President Sheinbaum is more intent on traveling the world now that she is president. We'll see how that goes. Another piece of news about her trip for us Mexicans is that she decided to take a commercial plane. She flew to Panama, then changed planes, commercial planes, and then flew to Rio. This is how the term of President López Obrador started. He would also take commercial planes. He would go everywhere on the major commercial airlines within Mexico and outside. But anyway, this is big news because this is a way for the president to say she is like everybody else. President Lopez Obrador ended up using military jets to move around. This is interesting because he was always very insistent on selling the presidential plane that Mexico had, that had been bought by President Felipe Calderon back in 2012, I believe. A very expensive but a very good plane. We ended up selling that plane after many years and a bit of a struggle to Azerbaijan. So now our former plane is in the Republic of Azerbaijan serving their president. So President López Obrador claimed that he should just be like any other Mexican and move around like that. The story changed when he was criticized or when some of his fellow passengers on airplanes did not like to see him in there that much. And they would make that known and they would speak to him and say what terrible things he did. Of course, many others liked that he was there and congratulated him. You know, this is how the country and politics is. But he got a bit tired of that and then ended up using military jets to move around, and that's how he did it. We kind of expected Claudia Sheinbaum to do the same, get on a military plane to fly all the way to Rio, but no, she decided to read a book. We don't know what she read, but this is how she got to Rio. What happened in Rio? Well, she had some suggestions. You know, these summits are just for them to get to know each other, to discuss policy, to talk to one another. She spoke to President Biden, President Joe Biden of the United States. This was pretty much a welcome and farewell meeting because I don't think they will be meeting again, but that was a good thing. But I would underscore a meeting that she had, a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. We thought it was very relevant because there is a new Donald Trump administration coming. This is something I have learned here in Connect with Mexico. I have a lot of Canadians listening to me and going to my courses and going to my Mexico conversations. And it's amazing how much we identify with each other, Canadians and Mexicans, when it comes to relations with the United States. So it is said, and I believe this is true, that President Sheinbaum and Prime Minister Trudeau talked about the US Mexico Canada agreement. They kind of agreed that they needed to fight the big bully in the room, which happens to be the United States in a new Donald Trump term, or at least this is the perception. And I believe that was a very good meeting that they had. Very well. Now we will go to our second headline, the 2025 federal budget of the Mexican government. Don't go out there running. Wait a second. Bear with me because this will not be a number crunching exercise, but just to give you some information about how the Mexican government makes money and spends its money. Like I said at the beginning, do not believe for a second that just because you're an expat here in Mexico, you're immune to any of these policies. It's really not as bad as it sounds. So let me give you just bits of information that I think will be useful and maybe even interesting to you. One is that the fiscal year in Mexico begins with a calendar year on January 1st. So there's time now to have the federal budget ready for the start of the year. Unlike in other places like the United States, I know I worked for the US government for many years, and I know that the US begins its fiscal year on October 1st. If you have been here for a long time in Mexico, you will remember that our presidents always took office on December 1st. This is how it was done. Every 6 years, there was an election in July and inaugural. on December 1st. This time, the law was changed. This was done by my former boss, former President Enrique Peña Nieto. He said, we need to modify this a bit. One of the reasons to change the election to June, but also change the inaugural to October the 1st, were two main reasons. One was that there were two leaders competing with one another for a whole 6 months, and that a little bit of wrongdoing could also happen when all these outgoing and incoming governments and officials was happening. So there's now only 3 months between the election and the actual inaugural. And another very important reason was that the way our democracies work is that usually the outgoing president leaves a national budget there that the new president has to sort of adjust to. So President Peña Nieto wanted to change this to give the new president, in this case President Sheinbaum, a chance to have her own federal budget. So the new Congress comes in September 1st. She is inaugurated on October 1st, and they have until, I believe, the end of November to send, I think it was actually 15 November, to send Congress a new federal budget. So the first important thing I think we need to consider is how much is the budget? The federal budget of the Mexican government for 2025 is 9.3 trillion Mexican pesos. Sounds like a lot of money, right? Well, in US dollars, that's equal to $458.1 billion with the exchange rate at this time. So just to consider the size of this, because when we hear in the news all these big numbers and all this spending here and there, we sometimes lose perspective because our monthly budgets are not quite as big, right? So just for you to consider, I would like you to think about the U.S. federal budget when it considers spending on defense. So what is the amount of U.S. defense spending for a year? In 2025, the US government will spend $850 billion on defense. That is a little more than twice what the whole Mexican government federal budget is. So while all the Mexican government will spend $460 billion, the US will spend only on defense $850 billion. I just kind of wanted you to, of course, this is the biggest economy and the biggest treasury, but I just wanted to have some perspective on how much money we're talking about. So just to make clear what the priorities are of Claudia Sheinbaum in her budget for 2025, it makes sense to know who got more money and where cuts were made. Let's go first with the cuts. This is the El Economista newspaper giving us this week this beautiful chart, this table on where the cuts were. The National Defense Secretariat, the Ministry of Defense, the Mexican Pentagon, if you will, was cut by 43.8%. Almost half of its budget was cut. Then we have the Environmental and Natural Resources Ministry, who got a cut of 35.4%. Then, this is important, security and citizen protection. There was a cut there on that ministry of 36.2%. So that is a lot of money. A lot of people are asking, why is it that so much money is being taken away from the federal security ministry? And I'll give you with health. The health system, that's clinics, regional hospitals, specialization, and all that, also was cut by 34%. That was very criticized. Columnists, analysts do not like that so much money is taken away from health. If a new pandemic comes, of course, there will be hardly any money prepared for that. Now, let's move on to the winners. Who got bigger budgets this time? So again, we have this chart by El Economista, and we have one agrarian development, territorial or urban development. This is a big secretariat that manages land, how it is distributed, and how it is taken care of. Then there comes the Ministry of Infrastructure, Communications, and Transportation. It got a boost of 72%. The reason for that is that big trains and big infrastructure projects, not as big, but similar to those of President López Obrador, will be built. There will be a new railway from Mexico City to Querétaro. That has long been in the books. President Peña Nieto tried to do that. López Obrador talked about it but didn't do it. And then President Sheinbaum is insisting on doing that. And if you know, Querétaro is northwest of Mexico City and on the way to the border, on the way to Laredo, say. So that eventually we will hoping to meet the United States border with new train lines. Okay, and just to close this difficult economic chapter, I will give you some of the information, some of the data that the finance ministry decided on to create this budget. Economic growth rate is expected to be between 2 and 3%, with an oil price of $57.8 per barrel and a crude oil production platform of 1.9 million barrels per day. That means that Mexico is expected to produce almost 2 million barrels of oil each day, crude oil. In addition, inflation is projected at 3.5%, an interest rate of 8% at the end of 2025, and an average exchange rate of 18.7 pesos per dollar is considered. Remember that we talked about the exchange rate a week ago. With Donald Trump arriving again to the White House, we got all the way to 20.53 pesos per US dollar. So the government is saying, oh no, everything's going to be fine. We're going to take control of our monetary policy, and we will stand at 18.7 pesos per dollar along the year. It is very optimistic, this forecast of the economy. Economists and columnists do not believe the Donald Trump factor has been included. They don't think the president and her finance minister really took a closer look at what a new Trump administration might do. Even though they're not there, they have pretty much said what they are planning to do. But there are many analysts who also say everything will be fine. There will be a few bumps, a few quarrels with Trump and his White House, but the economy will continue pretty much as it has been doing. Again, the 2 to 3% economic growth for 2025 is very optimistic. Most banks and rating agencies believe it will be at 1.5% tops, right? So we'll see. This is the economic session. I know it was a bit tough today. I hope you have no nightmares. But I would encourage you to continue seeing how Mexican economic policy continues under the new administration of President Sheinbaum. We now go into our arts and lifestyle section just to move you away from those terrible federal budget numbers. We will invite you to visit now the León, Guanajuato Hot Air Balloon Festival 2024. That took place a week ago during the weekend, and it is a yearly event. It is something that happens every year in the city, and it is very nice. It is something that people not only from León, but from surrounding cities go to. So we borrowed Eduardo Amasi's report on the festival from his YouTube channel Vida Feliz con Estilo. That translates to Happy Life with Style. He did a very good job, and we are using his images and pushing him aside a bit on the narration to tell you about it. But do know that we thank him for all the efforts that he did reporting that. So León, Guanajuato is one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in the state of Guanajuato. I would want you to know that. It's on the western side of the state. On the eastern side of Guanajuato is San Miguel de Allende. Many of you probably have been there. And right in the middle is Guanajuato City, the state capital. One more thing to say about Guanajuato is that it is also the geographical center of Mexico, just like Kansas in the United States. Those of you who are American, I know this because I lived for a year in Kansas and studied there at Washburn University. Guanajuato is the same thing. Guanajuato is pretty much the central state of the whole nation, so much so that a big statue of Christ the King, of course, this is a Catholic thing, was built really close to León on a hill that a Spanish priest who came to Guanajuato said, we have to build Christ and Jesus on this hill because it's pretty much quite where the center of Mexico is. And then we want Christ to reign supreme all over the nation. Those were his words. You can see the statue there. But what I want you to remember is that Guanajuato state is very central to anywhere else in Mexico. There are great airports in León, and then Querétaro The hot air balloons were beautiful to see, as you can see, and to fly on. The only one time I have ever flown on a hot air balloon, that was over Teotihuacan on one of my birthdays. It was an incredible experience. And you pretty much know what you're doing. It's an amazing view, but you don't want to think about what might go wrong. It is quite commercial. As you can see, there are a lot of commercial advertisers and what some Mexicans would call foreign characters in those balloons. But still, if you take a close look at how families get together, at how they do things, how much they enjoy the show that is over the weekend, we believe it makes sense and it would be something very worthwhile for you to visit. Maybe next year in 2025 in November. You have been telling us how much you like the Mexican of the Week section. We are really happy that you have been enjoying that. And do know that if you know someone or have read about someone that you think we should profile here, we'll be happy to do that if you can give us the information. And that will be very nice for this week in Mexico. Today, we have a woman, again, just like last week, and she is a very successful businesswoman, very wealthy. The money that she carries in her purse, I'm sure, could be enough to give you your pension and your retirement for life. She has been very successful. She comes from a family of business people, so there's no surprise there. This is Altagracia Gomez Sierra. She is originally from Jalisco. This is where I'm living now in Puerto Vallarta. She's from Guadalajara, the state capital, and she is very good buddies with Jalisco Governor elect Pablo Lemus. We will have a new governor in December. He has been already elected, and of course, they have plans to work together. So, what about Altagracia Gomez? She has been chosen by President Sheinbaum to lead the Business Advisory Council of the Mexican government. She will be the chief economic advisor to the president, coming from the private sector. So there's a council, there's a group of business people who will come up with some suggestions for the federal government. She is the link or the bridge between the federal government and the private sector and the business community. She is very well prepared for that. What will be her focus mostly? Nearshoring. I'm sure you've heard about nearshoring. This is an effort to move manufacturing away from China and into Mexico, that is much closer to the United States. And this is, of course, all under the framework of the United States Mexico Canada Agreement that is in place and that will be reviewed in a couple of years. But this is how trade and manufacturing should go. Altagracia Gomez has personally said that there's nothing to worry about with the arrival of a new Trump administration in the United States government. I will read you a little bit about Altagracia Gomez from the Proceso magazine. This is a news weekly in Mexico, and this was published in July when she was appointed as the incoming Business Advisory Council head. Originally from Guadalajara, Jalisco, she is a lawyer from the Escuela Libre de Derecho de Mexico and has studied at the Oxford Royal Academy and Harvard Business School. Her entrepreneurial streak comes from her family, which owns the Minsa Group, a corn flour producer. The Minsa Group, I'll stop there because the Minsa Group is just one of these huge companies that produce corn flour that end up becoming tortillas, right? So the tortilla business that she handles, that she manages, is very important. It is not hard to understand why tortillas would be a big business in Mexico. And then she also heads the Almer Company, the Industrial and Financial Group PEO, and Boss Maker Dina. I'll also make a stop there with the Boss Maker Dina because if you walked on any Mexican street, you see the public transportation buses and some major, just big cargo trucks, and you will see the Dina emblem, the Dina brand out there. You've probably seen it 1,000 times, but didn't know that Altagracia was the owner. She was the one who's building them. In 2022, Expansión magazine mentioned her among the 100 most important business people in Mexico. So this was Altagracia Gomez, a successful businesswoman who will have a lot to say about Mexican economic policy in the coming years. We hope you enjoyed this part. After all this economic news, you'd say the end is near. This is the end of This Week in Mexico for today. We thank you very much for being here. Do not hesitate to visit connectwithmexico.com. You'll find many resources and many tools there that will help you better understand the country. Send us an email. Go to our social media web pages. They are there, here described. There, you will also find them in our description here below on YouTube. And if you want to buy us a taco, that will be very welcome. It will be not only delicious, but very helpful in financing our program. Thank you very much again for being here. Have a great weekend and see you again next Friday.